Welcome to Silent Screams. Let's dive into tonight's terrifying tale. It began on a cold, moonless night, the kind of night that wraps everything in a heavy silence. I found myself driving down a narrow road, cutting through dense woods. The trees stretched high, their skeletal branches tangling above like twisted claws. My headlights barely pierced the darkness, creating shifting shadows that seemed to move just at the edge of my vision. I was headed to an old property left to me by an uncle I barely remembered. An estate tucked away in the middle of nowhere, perfect for solitude, or so I thought. The road seemed to stretch forever, a black ribbon unraveling into the night. My phone had no signal, and the GPS had given up miles ago. A feeling of unease crept up my spine as I glanced at the glowing map frozen on the screen. The directions had been straightforward until I turned off the main highway. After that, the path devolved into a labyrinth of gravel and forgotten trails. Still, I pressed on. I could see the faint outline of the house on the horizon, its silhouette a jagged wound against the sky. When I arrived, the place looked like something out of a dream, or maybe a nightmare. The house was large, its faded white paint peeling like dead skin. The windows were dark, reflecting nothing but the void of the night. The wind howled, rattling the shutters and carrying the faint smell of decay. A single lantern hung by the front door, swaying gently despite the stillness in the air. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the car door handle, as if some unseen force begged me to turn back, but curiosity got the better of me. The inside of the house was worse than I expected. The air was damp and cold, heavy with the scent of mildew and something metallic. Dust blanketed every surface, and cobwebs draped the corners like gossamer curtains. My footsteps echoed as I walked down the creaky hallway, the boards groaning beneath my weight. Each room was a snapshot of abandonment. An old dining table with chairs knocked askew, a faded rug hiding claw marks in the floor, and a cracked mirror that seemed to watch me as I passed. I settled in the room that looked the least haunted, a small study with a dusty sofa and a desk cluttered with old papers. Despite the eerie vibe, exhaustion overtook me. I dozed off, lulled by the rhythmic creaking of the wind outside. I woke up abruptly, heart pounding. Something was off. The house was silent, unnaturally so. I sat up, straining to hear anything. The faint tap-tap-tap of footsteps came from the floor above. They were deliberate, slow, and far too heavy to belong to any small animal. My mouth went dry. For a moment, I debated whether I should investigate or stay hidden. Against all better judgment, I grabbed my phone and crept upstairs. The air on the second floor was colder, almost icy. My breath fogged as I moved cautiously down the hallway. The door at the end was slightly ajar, revealing a faint flicker of light inside. My heart hammered in my chest as I approached. Pushing the door open, I froze. The room was empty, mostly. A chair sat in the center of the space, facing away from me. A single candle burned on the floor next to it, its flame unnaturally steady. But it was what sat in the chair that made my stomach drop. A figure cloaked in shadow slumped forward, its head hanging unnaturally to one side. The air around it shimmered faintly, distorting its edges like a mirage. As I took a cautious step closer, the figure jerked upright, its head snapping toward me. Empty sockets stared back where eyes should have been, and its mouth opened into a gaping void. I stumbled backward, tripping over my feet and crashing into the wall. The figure didn't move, but the candle suddenly extinguished, plunging the room into darkness. My flashlight shook as I scrambled to turn it on. When the beam finally cut through the gloom, the chair was empty. No figure, no candle, just an oppressive silence that felt like it was pressing against my skin. I bolted down the stairs, the sound of something following me echoing in the narrow hall. Back in the study, I locked the door and tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, or maybe my tired mind playing games. But deep down, I knew better. The house had a presence, something ancient and malevolent. My thoughts were interrupted by a low, guttural whisper coming from the other side of the door. It was faint at first, unintelligible, but it grew louder, more insistent, until it was a chorus of overlapping voices. They called my name. I backed away, clutching my phone like it was a lifeline. The door began to rattle violently, the knob turning as if something, or someone, was desperate to get inside. My body froze, paralyzed with fear. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. I didn't dare move for what felt like hours. Finally, I mustered the courage to open the door. The hallway was empty, but the faint sound of crying drifted from downstairs. It was soft, almost childlike, and it made my skin crawl. Against every instinct, I followed the sound. The crying led me to the basement, a place I had actively avoided exploring. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a staircase that disappeared into inky darkness. The sobs grew louder as I descended, each step creaking beneath my weight. At the bottom, the air was thick, almost suffocating. The light from my phone barely penetrated the gloom, but I could make out shapes, boxes, furniture, and something else. In the corner of the room stood a figure, its back to me. It swayed gently, its arms hanging limp at its sides. The crying stopped the moment my light hit it. Before I could react, the figure turned, its face a horrifying amalgamation of features. Its mouth stretched unnaturally wide, emitting a guttural scream that echoed through the basement. I stumbled backward, falling against the staircase as the figure lunged toward me, its movements jerky and unnatural. I scrambled up the stairs, slamming the door shut and shoving a chair under the handle. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath. The house was no longer just eerie. It was alive, and it wanted me gone. Or worse, it wanted me to stay. The silence after the basement encounter was deafening. Every muscle in my body was taut, and my mind raced with questions I didn't dare voice. I leaned against the door, my breath uneven, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. But deep down, I knew there was no sense to be made. This house was wrong. It wasn't just abandoned or creepy. It was alive in ways that defied logic. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. I lost track of time, sitting in the dark study, gripping my phone like it could somehow protect me. But the screen was blank. No signal, no Wi-Fi, no escape. The only sound was the faint creak of the house settling, or so I told myself. Every now and then, I thought I heard something else. A soft shuffle of movement, like feet brushing against the floorboards, or the distant echo of a voice calling my name. Then the lights flickered. They had been dead since I arrived, leaving me dependent on my flashlight. But now, a dim, sickly glow buzzed to life in the corner of the room. A lamp, one I hadn't noticed before, cast a weak light over the desk. Papers that had been a dusty jumble before were now neatly arranged, as if someone, or something, had been sitting there, waiting for me. My curiosity warred with my fear. Against every ounce of common sense, I approached the desk. The papers were old, yellowed with age, and filled with handwritten notes in a spidery, almost frantic script. One page caught my eye. It bore a crude drawing of the house, with symbols scrawled around its perimeter. Strange angular markings that seemed to hum with energy the longer I stared at them. Beneath the two words that sent a chill through me. Stay out. The lamp flickered again, its light sputtering, and then I heard it. A soft, melodic humming, drifting down from upstairs. My stomach twisted. It was a woman's voice, sweet and mournful, carrying a tune that was both haunting and familiar. But there was no one else in the house. There couldn't be. I debated leaving right then and there, abandoning the estate, my uncle's mysterious inheritance, everything. But something rooted me in place. Whether it was morbid curiosity or the house itself, I couldn't tell. The humming grew louder, beckoning me. My legs moved on their own, carrying me back up the creaky staircase. The sound seemed to come from the far end of the hallway, where the door to a previously locked bedroom now stood wide open. Pale moonlight spilled into the corridor, illuminating a trail of wet footprints leading inside. I stopped just outside the room, my hand trembling as I gripped the door frame. The humming ceased the moment I peered in. The bedroom was sparse, just a bed with a moth-eaten quilt, a wardrobe with one door hanging loose, and a cracked window that allowed the cold night air to seep in. But the footprints stopped at the edge of the bed, where a small, waterlogged doll lay propped against the pillow. Its glass eyes seemed to follow me as I stepped inside. I approached the bed cautiously, my gaze locked on the doll. It was old, its painted face chipped and worn, its dress tattered and stained. Yet it seemed to radiate a strange energy, like it was watching me, waiting. I reached out, my fingers brushing against its damp surface. A loud bang shattered the silence, making me jump. The wardrobe door had slammed shut on its own, the sound reverberating through the room. My flashlight flickered, and in its stuttering beam, I saw something move, a shadow darting across the wall, too fast to be natural. I backed away, my heart pounding. The doll tipped forward, landing face down on the bed, as if it, too, was trying to escape. I didn't hesitate. I turned and bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me. The hallway felt longer than before, stretching endlessly in both directions. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with the smell of damp earth. My feet pounded against the floor as I ran back to the study, but when I reached it, the door was gone. The study wasn't there anymore. Instead, the hallway looped back on itself, leading me to the same bedroom I had just fled. The door creaked open as I approached, revealing the doll now sitting upright in the center of the floor. It faced me directly, its glass eyes glinting in the moonlight, and behind it, etched into the wall in dripping black letters, were the words, "You can't leave." Panic surged through me. I stumbled back, clutching my chest as my breathing grew erratic. The house was playing with me, bending reality in ways I couldn't understand. Every instinct screamed at me to get out, but the way out no longer existed. I was trapped. I turned back down the hallway, this time moving slower, more deliberate. Every door I tried was locked, every window sealed shut. The house groaned around me, as if mocking my attempts to escape. And then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. It was the same figure from the basement, its face an unnatural blur of distorted features. It didn't move at first, just stood there, watching. But as I stepped back, it took a step forward, and another. Its movements were jagged, like a puppet on tangled strings. I broke into a sprint, my flashlight swinging wildly as I careened down the hall. I didn't know where I was going. The house had twisted into a labyrinth of identical corridors and doors that led nowhere. The figure's footsteps echoed behind me, steady and unrelenting. No matter how fast I ran, it always seemed to be just around the corner, just out of sight. Eventually, I found myself back at the front door. It stood wide open, revealing the forest beyond bathed in an unnatural unnatural silvery light. Relief flooded me as I bolted toward it, but as soon as I crossed the threshold, the ground shifted beneath my feet. I stumbled, falling into darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the study. The papers on the desk were gone. The lamp was shattered on the floor, and in the corner of the room, the doll sat, its glass eyes glinting in the dim light. The whispering began again, louder this time, surrounding me on all sides. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it was useless. The voices grew and grew until they were a deafening roar, filling my mind with images I couldn't comprehend. Shadows writhing in endless corridors, faces twisted into masks of agony, hands clawing at walls that bled black ichor. And then, everything went silent. I looked up, and the doll was gone. The study was empty, the air heavy with a stillness that pressed against my skin. I stood there, trembling, waiting for whatever came next.